The room went still, not quiet still. You could almost hear the weight of her words settling into the oak-paneled walls of the hearing chamber. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to point one sharp, deliberate line. Her seventh cut through the noise like a blade, slicing past the interruptions, past the arrogance, past the smirks that had filled the last 2 hours. Stephen Miller blinked, his pen frozen in midair. Cameras clicked like distant thunder, each flash capturing the stunned silence, each shutter an exclamation point. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Not the aides shuffling papers. Not the reporters perched in the back rows, their fingers hovering over keyboards. Not even the chair pounding the gavel, his voice suddenly thin against the gravity of what had just been said. "Order," he barked, his tone cracking. "Order." But there was no order now. Not really. Because everyone in that room knew they'd just witnessed something rare, something that would play on loop across every screen in America before nightfall. It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them, steady, unflinching, the kind of calm that makes arrogance look small. The kind of calm that forces the world to lean in, to listen, to feel the shift of power in real time. Somewhere in the back, a staffer mouthed "wow." Somewhere outside the room, the first notifications lit up phones, Crockett versus Miller the moment. And for millions watching, it wasn't just political theater. It was vindication. For every person who had been told to sit down, to stay quiet, to accept the noise instead of their truth, this was their moment. Even Miller seemed to know it. His practiced smirk faltered, the words he'd rehearsed dying in his throat as the chamber seemed to hold its breath. And in that stillness, the story began to write itself. Not just a clash of personalities. Not just another headline. This was about dignity versus disruption, composure versus chaos. A single, sharp reminder that calm doesn't mean silent, and that silence doesn't mean surrender. But how did it come to this? Let's rewind, because what led up to that seventh line is nothing short of cinematic. It started like any other hearing: polished statements, measured tones, the quiet shuffle of papers filling the sterile hum of the room. But beneath that thin layer of civility, something volatile pulsed. Journalists lined the back wall, eyes sharp, cameras at the ready, waiting for the spark they knew was coming. Every click of a pen, every whispered exchange, every shift of posture felt loaded. Because this wasn't just another session. This was the hearing that would decide more than policy. It would test reputations, legacies, and the very idea of public trust. And at the center of it all sat Stephen Miller, his presence impossible to ignore. He leaned back in his chair, every movement deliberate, every glance dripping with quiet provocation. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett adjusted her notes, calm and focused, the kind of poise that comes from knowing your facts, your purpose, and your power. The air felt electric, a tension so thick you could almost taste it. Everyone sensed this hearing would explode, but no one predicted how hard. On social media, the hashtags were already forming, speculation spreading like wildfire. Commentators whispered about fireworks. Staffers exchanged tight, nervous smiles. This wasn't just a debate. It was a powder keg waiting for the first spark. And when it came, it didn't start with shouting or chaos. It started with something far more calculated. A lean forward. A slow, measured smirk. A voice cutting through the low murmur of the room with the precision of a blade. And when Stephen Miller leaned forward, the first interruption cut through the room like a blade. Stephen Miller has always walked into rooms like he owns them. The sharp suit, the clipped tone, the air of someone who believes every word he speaks is gospel. It's his signature. But beneath the polished exterior lies a history that reads less like a resume and more like a highlight reel of calculated provocations. For years, Miller has thrived in the chaos of controversy. From his days as a young age shaping some of the most hardline immigration policies in recent memory, To his sharp-tongued television appearances that blurred the line between policy debate and performance art, Miller has made a brand out of confrontation. He speaks with precision, every syllable rehearsed, every pause intentional, projecting control while wielding rhetoric designed to provoke. And for too long, that approach worked. Networks aired his every word. Panels dissected his sound bites. Opponents bristled, stumbled, faltered. He thrived on their hesitation, feeding off the spectacle he orchestrated. Ironically, his calm, almost gentlemanly delivery often masked the sharpness of his message policies and positions that left deep scars, particularly in immigrant and minority communities. He didn't shout to be heard, he whispered and let the echo do the damage. Inside that hearing room, all of that history sat with him. Every moment of calculated arrogance. Every headline. Every viral clip where he had dictated the tempo, controlled the narrative, and walked away untouched. And on that day, as cameras rolled and the nation watched, Miller carried that same quiet confidence, a man convinced that this, too, would be another stage where he would dominate the script. But what he didn't count on was the room itself shifting. Because across from him sat someone who had no intention of playing by his rules. Someone who understood that composure can be sharper than chaos, and that silence, the right kind of silence, can speak louder than 1,000 sound bites. And as the opening minutes of the hearing unfolded, that confidence of his wasn't just visible, it was loud. But the louder the voice of arrogance, the louder the call for truth that was about to answer it. Before Jasmine Crockett ever sat under the harsh lights of a congressional hearing, she was just a girl from the South who learned early that the world doesn't hand out fairness, you have to demand it. She grew up watching her parents work 2, sometimes 3 jobs, the kind of quiet, grinding hustle that teaches you to speak up because no one else will. When classmates were bullied, she was the one who stepped in. When neighbors needed someone to navigate the red tape of City Hall, she was the one making calls, showing up, refusing to be ignored. That grit carried her to law school, where she didn't just study the system, she challenged it. She took on cases no one else wanted, defending tenants facing eviction, immigrants navigating impossible paperwork, young men stopped and frisked for the crime of existing in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time. She learned that justice isn't a concept, it's a fight, and sometimes the fight is dirty, relentless, exhausting. But Jasmine never flinched. She listened. She worked. She showed up again and again until people who had been invisible for so long started to believe in their own voices. When she entered politics, it wasn't because she wanted the spotlight. It was because she knew what it felt like to live in the shadows of decisions made by people who never understood, or never cared. Her campaigns were built on kitchen tables and folding chairs, on conversations in church basements and community centers, where people told her their stories of loss, of perseverance, of quiet victories that never made the news. And every time she spoke, whether in a cramped town hall or on the House floor, that same calm strength carried through. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her power was in her presence, steady, grounded, unshakable. By the time she earned her seat, people knew, Jasmine Crockett wasn't there to play politics. She was there to represent the unheard, to stand steady when others folded, to be the calm in a storm designed to rattle anyone not built for it. So when she walked into that hearing room, legal pad in hand, head held high, she wasn't thinking about viral clips or trending hashtags. She was thinking about the families who had trusted her to be their voice, the communities who had sent her there to tell their truth without fear. She wasn't just prepared for this fight, she was born for it. And that calm strength would soon be tested, 6 times in a row. The first interruption came like a flicker, sharp, dismissive, almost casual. Stephen Miller leaning forward, voice slicing through Jasmine's opening remarks. She paused, just for a beat, then continued as if he hadn't spoken at all. Calm. Unshaken. The second time, his tone sharpened. Louder. More insistent. The room stirred, staffers shifting in their seats, cameras turning. Jasmine didn't flinch. She finished her sentence, eyes steady, her voice a quiet counterpoint to his noise. By the third interruption, the tension was undeniable. Reporters' fingers hovered over keyboards, ready to capture the moment. He spoke over her again, clipped, condescending. She simply folded her hands, waited for the silence, and then continued. The power wasn't in her volume, it was in her patience. The fourth and fifth interruptions came like rapid jabs, desperate now, Miller's words growing more frantic, more cutting, as if he could force her composure to crack. But each time, she answered with the same calm cadence, the room leaning closer with every word. She refused to surrender. By the sixth, even the chair shifted uncomfortably, murmurs rippling through the chamber. The tension was suffocating, every eye locked on her, waiting, needing her to answer. She did not raise her voice. She simply let the moment breathe, a silence so sharp it cut through the noise, louder than any shout could. And somewhere in that silence, the balance shifted. Every camera tightened its frame. Every ear strained for her next word. Because everyone could feel it building. The spark was coming. But it was the seventh moment that turned the hearing into history. The seventh interruption came like a storm. Stephen Miller leaned forward, jaw tight, his voice sharp enough to slice through the air. His words were clipped, calculated, the kind of interruption meant not just to derail, but to diminish. But this time, Jasmine Crockett didn't pause. She didn't wait. She raised her eyes, slow and deliberate, until the entire room seemed to shift with her gaze. For a split second, everything froze: the shuffle of papers, the faint hum of cameras, the whispered commentary from the back row. Even Miller seemed caught in that stillness, unaware that the balance of power had already tipped. And then she spoke. "Mr. Miller," she said, voice calm, clear, steady, "I was elected to represent the people, not to be interrupted 6 times by a man who mistakes volume for truth." The words landed like a gavel striking oak. Silence. Absolute. Heavy. Electric. Aides froze in mid-step. Journalists, mid-type, stopped. Even the chair, his hand hovering over the gavel, lowered it slowly, as if realizing that no sound he could make would carry more weight than the one that had just filled the chamber. Miller blinked once, twice, his rehearsed smirk faltering under the unflinching calm staring back at him. The confidence that had carried him through countless confrontations cracked, if only for a heartbeat, and the cameras caught every frame. In the back of the room, someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice, quiet but sharp, cut through the tension, "Did you hear that?" And then came the murmurs, quiet at first, then swelling, staffers exchanging glances, reporters snapping back to their keyboards, the clicking of cameras like thunder rolling through the chamber. The clip was already flying across the internet. Notifications buzzing. Hashtags forming in real time: Crockett mic drop, volume is not truth, 7th line. But inside the room, there was no noise, only the weight of a truth spoken without anger, without theatrics, without fear. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply sat back, hands folded, letting the silence do the work. Miller shifted, papers rustling under his fingertips, his posture stiff but suddenly smaller, as though the walls themselves had closed in. And still, Jasmine said nothing more. Because she didn't need to. Sometimes power isn't in how loud you speak, it's in how clearly you're heard. Outside the chamber, phones lit up. In newsrooms across the country, editors barked for the clip. By the time the hearing wrapped, millions had already seen it, Millions more had already shared it. In that moment, the story stopped being about politics. It became something bigger, a reminder that dignity, when wielded without fear, is the sharpest tool of all. And as the words echoed beyond the room, the real battle began online. By the time the hearing adjourned, the clip had already detonated across every corner of the internet. Within minutes, Crockett mic drop climbed to the top of Twitter's trending list, flanked by "Volume is not truth" and "Seventh line." TikTok was flooded with edits, slow-motion replays of the moment, Jasmine's words punctuated by dramatic music, bold captions flashing across the screen. Cable news anchors replayed the exchange on loop, each network spinning the silence that followed her seventh line like it was an earthquake no one had seen coming. "A masterclass in composure," one commentator declared. "The moment arrogance met its match," said another. Public figures piled on with their reactions. Celebrities tweeted their support. Civil rights leaders praised her poise. A late-night host quipped, "Stephen Miller got interrupted by reality." But the most powerful reactions didn't come from blue-check accounts or political pundits. They came from everyday Americans. A young teacher in Texas posted a video with tears in her eyes. "She spoke for all of us who've been told to sit down, to stay quiet, to let someone talk over us." A grandmother in New York wrote simply, "Finally. Someone who doesn't just hear us, someone who is us." Memes flooded timelines. Jasmine in superhero capes, headlines like "The Silence That Roared." Even international outlets picked it up, framing it as a moment of calm defiance that resonated beyond U.S. politics. By evening, interviews were lined up. Requests poured in from every major outlet, and through it all, Jasmine remained exactly as she had been in that room, steady, composed, unshaken by the noise now orbiting her. The story had grown larger than the hearing, larger than the moment. It had become a cultural pulse point, a reminder, shared in countless captions and comments, that dignity still carries weight in a world addicted to chaos. But beneath the trending hashtags, a deeper lesson was resonating. In the end, it wasn't about the volume of the words spoken, it was about their weight. In that room, Jasmine Crockett didn't just answer back. She reminded the nation what leadership looks like: steady in the storm, unflinching in the face of arrogance, unafraid to speak truth without raising her voice. Because that's the thing about dignity, it doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to dominate the room. It simply exists, powerful and undeniable, until everyone is forced to notice. Stephen Miller's interruptions were loud. They were sharp. They were designed to rattle her, to strip her of the calm that makes power uncomfortable. But in the end, it was his noise that faded and her clarity that carried. And for millions watching, that moment wasn't just a viral clip. It was a reminder that strength isn't measured in decibels, it's measured in composure. That arrogance crumbles when faced with someone who refuses to be moved. In that room, history wasn't written in shouting matches or grand theatrics. It was written in the quiet conviction of a single voice that refused to be drowned out. And for everyone watching, it was a call to remember their own power. 7 Interruptions. One calm, unshakable response. That was the moment, the seventh line that silenced a room built for noise and reminded the nation what true strength sounds like. Jasmine Crockett didn't just defend herself that day, she set a standard. A standard for what it means to lead with dignity, to hold your ground without raising your voice, to turn chaos into clarity with nothing more than truth. And that's why this moment Stephen Miller interrupts Jasmine Crockett 6 times, her 7th line shuts him down, will be remembered. Not because it trended, not because it sparked 1,000 memes, but because it showed us all that there is power in composure, and that silence, when wielded with purpose, can echo louder than any shout. If you felt that moment, if you saw yourself in her calm and her courage, share this story. Talk about it. Let it remind someone that their voice steady, clear, unshaken is enough. Because this isn't just about one hearing or one viral clip. It's about what happens when we refuse to be interrupted, when we take back the narrative and say, no, you will hear me. Subscribe if you want to be part of these conversations, if you want to keep amplifying voices that stand firm in the face of noise. And share this with someone who needs to know, dignity wins. Every time. Because in moments like these, silence is never an option.